News of the Times. The mysterious, tragic affair at Kidwelly. Welcome to News of the Times. In today's episode, it is 1881 in Kidwelly, southwest Wales. Little John Thomas, 11 years old, has been given the task of walking about half a mile to drop off some shoes that have been ordered from his father, a shoemaker. He successfully drops the shoes off and he receives 10 shillings. Making his way home, he sees two of his friends, David Mazey, 12 years of age, and his brother Benjamin Mazey, 10 years of age. John Thomas is seen clearly by the next door neighbour entering the house of the two Mazey brothers, who state that their mother is not home. John Thomas will not be seen alive again. His body, weirdly found in a ditch the day after the same ditch had been completely searched, is a broken mass of horrific injuries that are hard to imagine having been committed by any person, child or man. This case made the national papers of the time due to the absolute horrific nature of the injuries inflicted upon the child, with his broken body drained of blood, the young age of the suspected murderers, and the mystery surrounding the temporary disappearance of the body. And in today's end of episode, further particular segment, we look at a case involving two not so uncommon events in Victorian England: the sad passing of a young lady after having been given birth, and the realization that she had been buried alive. Oi, still here, are you? Most have stumbled out by now or got lost down the alley. If you're sticking around, you might as well pull your weight. Slam that like button. Helps keep the barrels full and the chatter lively. And if you ain't subscribed yet, what's the hold up? Join the crew, mate. Same jokes, same faces, and always room for one more at the table. Come on, don't be shy. Hit it and make yourself a proper regular. And with that business concluded, on with the show. Background. The Mazey family were a successful family with few monetary concerns. David Mazey worked as a tin plater and earned better than average wages. He and his wife had two boys, David, 12 years of age, and Benjamin, 10 years of age. Their mother was pregnant with their third child. The family had no history of trouble within the neighbourhood and were seen as ordinary residents in the community. In contrast, the Thomas family were not as fortunate. Evan Thomas worked as a shoemaker, eking out a living the best he could. His wife, Lettice, was a sickly woman, unable to help much to earn extra income. Their son, John Thomas, 11 years of age, was a sprightly lad. He was friends with the Mazey boys, David and Benjamin, who were around his same age. In February 1881, John Thomas is tasked by his father to deliver some ordered shoes to a house only about half a mile away. John Thomas successfully delivers the shoes, where he is rewarded with 10 shillings, 1 shilling more than the price of the shoes, and a spot of lunch. Heading towards home, he is hailed by his friends David and Benjamin, who exhort him to come to their house as their mother is away. The next door neighbour clearly sees John Thomas happily entering his friend's house, but he is never seen to leave it. Night comes and there is no John Thomas. The family are concerned and make the rounds of neighbours asking if anyone has seen their son. This includes the Mazey family, who state that no one in the family has seen John Thomas that day. When John Thomas does not appear the following day, the police are contacted and a search is commenced. John Thomas is eventually found on the grounds of the Mazey property. He has been horrifically butchered. From the Cardiff Times, 12th of February 1881, the terrible tragedy at Kidwelly, magisterial inquiry. Public feeling respecting the terrible crime discovered here yesterday seems to be intensifying. The occurrence has awakened the utmost horror throughout the whole countryside, which is increased by the fact that no such crime has been committed in the locality for many years, and probably none at all, surrounded by circumstances of such revolting brutality. The coroner's inquiry conducted today has, if possible, enshrouded the event with a greater mystery than formerly surrounded it. The inquest. The coroner's inquiry commenced shortly after 12 today, before the mayor of Kidwelly and a jury of whom the ex-mayor was foreman. Contrary to the rule usually followed in such cases, the accused, Jane Mazey, and her two children, David and Benjamin, were not present, nor were they represented at the inquiry. Evan Thomas, the shoemaker of Chapel House, Kidwelly, the father of the murdered boy, was the first witness. He said his son left home on Wednesday afternoon to go to Muddlecombe Farm with a pair of shoes. Witness saw nothing of him afterwards till the body was brought to his house. The lad, who was 11 years of age, was quite well when he left home. Margaret Anthony, daughter of Mrs. Anthony Muddlecombe, said that the deceased came to their house on Wednesday at about 2 o'clock with a pair of boots. Witness gave him half a sovereign. The boy had some dinner at Muddlecombe and stayed about a quarter of an hour. Anne Hughes, wife of David Hughes, the blacksmith of Stockwell Road, said she saw the deceased about 3:30 on Wednesday last by the gate entering Stockwell, where the Mazeys live. David Mazey was with him. Both boys went into the house and closed the door. The father of the deceased came to neighbour Anne Hughes the next day at about 10 o'clock. She told him what she had seen the day before. In the afternoon, witness had a conversation with Mrs. Mazey, in which she denied that the boy had entered the house and called the witness a liar for saying that he did. She further said that it seemed as if the earth had swallowed him. Whereas the suspicion rested initially purely on the two boys, the mother's false claim that John Thomas was never in her house brings Mrs. Mazey under suspicion as well. The next testimony of the doctor lays out a crime so brutal as to be unparalleled in the community. Mr. David Jones, surgeon of Kidwelly, said he made a post-mortem examination of the deceased that morning. The body was clothed, and on the left side of the coat there was some brain substance. After removing the clothing, which was damp, the witness noticed that the body was covered with marks of a greenish hue, showing signs that decomposition had set in. The head was cut open from the right eye across the bridge of the nose to the floor of the left eye. All the bones of the skull cap were broken to pieces, and all the brain had disappeared except the part called the small brain, which was loose and had evidently been placed there. The body at the base of the brain was quite shattered, and the upper jaw was fractured in 4 distinct pieces. Some blood had excluded from the right eye. The heart and lungs were quite healthy, but nearly altogether devoid of blood. I do not think the fracture of the skull could have been caused by any fall. It is possible, but not probable, that 2 boys aged 12 and 10 might have caused the injuries which the deceased showed. I believe a blunt instrument was used. It might have been a hammer. There was superficial wounds on the left cheek, which must have been caused by a sharp instrument. The nature of the wounds to the skull would account for the body being devoid of blood. I conclude that the deceased was murdered before 5 p.m. on Wednesday. I do not think the body could have been in the ditch from that time till the body was found. The clothes were not soaked as they would have been if exposed to all the rain which fell in the interval. Witnesses are brought forward of having seen Jane Mazey, the mother of the two boys, enter her house between 3 and 4, which, if the medical testimony was accurate, would have surely enabled her to see young John Thomas. Suspicion against Jane Mazey increases with testimony given by a witness who has seen Mrs. Mazey right after the broken body of John Thomas had been found, and whose immediate reaction is to be fearful of her own youngest child, Benjamin. David Thomas, labourer, said he was one of the party of men searching for the body in Mazey's garden on Friday morning. Witness was standing on the top of the hedge with Frederick Lloyd, who saw part of the deceased's trousers beneath a lot of weeds. The body was found, and the witness immediately fetched a policeman, and in doing so, witness met Jane Mazey, and when she heard him say the body had been found, she cried, "Oh, my dear Benjamin, poor little fellow," 2 or 3 times. On the evening of John Thomas's disappearance, his mother, Lettice Thomas, visited the Mazey household, asking if they had seen her son, John Thomas. Mrs. Mazey states that they had not seen him, and also confirmed that both boys were in bed, although it was only 7 o'clock, and that therefore they were unable to be questioned. The inquest concluded with the evidence from the police sergeant on the scene, who attests to finding John Thomas's body. Police Sergeant Jones was called to show the position of the body when found. He said the deceased was lying face downwards, both hands being under the body. The clothes were damp. The skull was shattered. The witness found a small portion of the brain on the ground, and he placed it in the open skull. This concluded the evidence to be taken before the coroner and the jury without any summing up beyond a remark that the medical evidence was important and conclusive, and they retired to consider their verdict. After a consultation of about a quarter of an hour, they returned a verdict that the deceased had died of injuries to his skull inflicted with a blunt instrument, and that he was wilfully murdered by some person or persons unknown. The murder is all-consuming in the village and spreads to the national newspapers. Given the circumstances, the Mazeys are the centre of attention, and their house becomes a ghoulish tourist site of townsfolk and outsiders alike. The atrocious crime discovered here on Friday last still forms the all-absorbing topic of conversation among all classes of the population. Interest increases, and the tongues of those who, on Friday and Saturday, were extremely reticent on the matter are being gradually loosened. Still, the whole of the particulars which can be elicited by outsiders are rather meagre. So far as can be ascertained, no steps have been taken to discover the exact spot where the murder was committed. The house of the Mazeys lies on the outskirts of Kidwelly, on the direct road 2.5 miles from Muddlecombe, the farm to which the unfortunate boy was sent on the afternoon of the murder. It has the appearance of having been a farmhouse, and with certain ruins on the building, stands in its own grounds, entirely separate from any other house. In front is a large plot of ground, giving considerable opportunity to the neighbours to observe anyone who might enter the premises. This goes to confirm the story of Mrs. Hughes, who lives opposite, and who says that she observed the parley between the accused boys and the deceased when the latter entered the house at their invitation. Behind the house is a very large extent of garden with some ruined buildings, and the exceptional facilities thus afforded for the concealment of the body makes one wonder at the inexplicable negligence displayed in simply placing the corpse in a shallow ditch and covering it with a few loose weeds. The searchers who visited the house and grounds on the Thursday declared that they passed over this ditch several times, and they are certain the body was not there when they last visited it that night. The fact that the clothes were but damp when the body was found, notwithstanding the heavy rain which fell on the Thursday, goes to confirm this statement. On the hedge above the spot, some quarter of an hour before, the portion of clothing which obtruded through the weeds was observed by one of them. The great difficulty with which the police have to cope undoubtedly is the entire absence of any trace of blood about the premises. Certain garments belonging to the accused woman and the boys, which have evidently been partially washed, having been sent to the county analyst for examination, and this will alone will necessitate a delay of some days. Of course, this washing of the clothes forms a suspicious circumstance in connection with the case. Well, the proved possession of the money which was paid to the deceased boy is another. The fact, too, remains that the deceased was seen to enter the house of the accused, but never to come out from there, and was subsequently found dead in the garden. But after all is said and done, beyond statements of the prisoners themselves, the evidence against them must be purely circumstantial. There are several painful surroundings to the case, among them being the fact that the accused woman is far advanced in pregnancy, and since the time of her arrest has, it is stated, taken no solid food whatever. The Mazeys are in a fairly respectable way of life, the husband earning a very good wage in his occupation at the tin works. With the police diligently pursuing all leads and evidence continuing to point to the Mazey boys as well as the mother as an accessory, the case comes before a magisterial court. From the Cardiff Times, the 14th of May, 1881. Jottings in court. Case of the prosecution, the defence. What Mr. Justice Cave truly characterised as the strangest trial he had ever heard of took place today. The excitement which reigned in Kidwelly in the immediate neighbourhood at the time of the supposed murder seems to have again been raised. It even ran so high in Swansea that for some days previous to the trial, photographs of the accused mother and two sons, together with facsimiles of letters written by them, were exhibited for sale in the Swansea print shop. The neighbourhood of the town hall in this is besieged by crowds of persons unable to gain admittance, and the court was quite full. When the prisoners were brought into the dock, there was certainly nothing in their appearance that would indicate any sign of cruel disposition, but their confinement in jail for 3 months had evidently told upon them, their countenance being pale and thin. The female prisoner alone appeared to be impressed with her position. All the prisoners pleaded not guilty, and on appeal the judge allowed the female prisoner to sit down. Jury appeared to be composed of tradesmen and farmers, and presented no difference to the ordinary juries in assize cases. The first order of business is whether the boys can be legally tried for murder. Mr. Bowen, QC, the prosecuting counsel, in his opening address to the jury, characterised the case as a most painful one. The law, he remarked, declared that persons under 8 years of age were incapable of committing murder. Over 14, they were considered responsible for the crime of murder. Between the ages of 8 and 14, it was for the jury to decide. One of the principal points in his address was the fact that the deceased boy had that day had two dinners, one at home and the other at the farmhouse, where he received the half-sovereign, the dinners being a very different kind of food. This would form a very important point for their consideration, because the medical evidence would show how long the boy lived after he'd had the second dinner. During the council's recital of the facts of the tragedy, the boy prisoners preserved a perfectly stolid appearance, but the mother seemed to suffer much, and was supplied with water from which she repeatedly drank. The chain of circumstantial evidence, as given in detail by the council, seemed overwhelmingly against all the prisoners. Evidence begins with a plan of the area that has been drawn by a surveyor and handed to all members of the judiciary. One interesting aspect is the presence of a ruined building with a swing in the yard that was located not far from the Mazey household. The neighbour, Anne Hughes, once again affirms that she saw John Thomas quite clearly enter the Mazey house. Mrs. Mazey, throughout the trial, remains bereft and in tears. Evidence brought forward by Sergeant Jones regarding his questioning of young Benjamin Mazey, the youngest of the two brothers, elicits what sounds like the beginnings of a confession. When the court resumed, the younger of the prisoners was allowed to sit down. The first witness called was Police Sergeant Jones, who deposed that on asking the youngest of the prisoners, Benjamin Mazey, as to the half-sovereign, the latter implicated his brother. Benjamin told the constable where the remainder of the money was hidden, both his own share and his brother's. When the constable said that on his charging the boy prisoners with the murder, and that they said they should never see their mother again, the female prisoner evinced great agitation and appeared scarce able to control her emotions. The evidence of P.C. Thomas pointed to the first intimation of the line of defence, that the deceased boy fell from a swing. This was told by the boy David Mazey on the way to Carmarthen jail. But the keeper of Kidwelly lock-up house said that David had given another version of the affair, that John Thomas fell from an old roof, not from the swing. Clothing from the boys and Mrs. Mazey's had been sent to be analysed for blood traces. Blood traces were indeed found. The analyst's testimony was conclusive as to the presence of blood both on the clothing of the female prisoner and the boys, and the medical officer, Mr. D. Jones, stated that from his examination of the contents of the stomach, he believed the boy had lived about 3 hours after having eaten the food in the stomach. He also gave it as his opinion that a fall could not have caused the injuries found on the body. The preponderance of evidence for the prosecution is heavy indeed from the magisterial proceedings. The case will go to trial. The trial. At the Southwell Assizes on Friday at the Guildhall in Swansea, before Mr. Justice Cave, David Mazey, 12, and Benjamin Mazey, 10, were indicted for unlawfully, feloniously, and of malice and aforethought, killing and murdering John Thomas, aged 11 years, on the 2nd of February. Jane Mazey was indicted as an accessory after the fact. On being charged, all the defendants pleaded not guilty, and the female prisoner, who is pregnant, was accommodated with a seat in the dock. Mr. Bowen, in opening the case, said he need hardly tell the jury that they were about to engage in a most important and painful inquiry. Inquiries of this kind were always important, but this was particularly painful on account of the youths of the two boys. They were indicted, as the jury heard, for the murder of another boy named John Thomas on Wednesday, the 2nd of February of this year, whilst the mother was charged not with having taken any part in the absolute murder of the boy, but with having concealed the fact of the boy having been improperly dealt with. David Mazey was 12 years of age last Christmas, while Benjamin was 10 years old at the time. The prosecution begins outlining their case. Much of the testimony is the same as that which was brought forward at the magisterial hearing, and many of the same witnesses are called forward to confirm their previous statements. The testimony from the medical surgeon is gruesome. It appeared that the boy, John Thomas, lived with his father, a shoemaker, at Kidwelly. After dinner on the 2nd of February last, he was sent to deliver a pair of boots at a house half a mile from Muddlecombe. His dinner before leaving consisted of fried beef and greens, but no potatoes. At Muddlecombe he saw Miss Anthony, the person for whom the shoes were made, and she gave him 10 shillings, having no change, the price of the boots being 9 shillings. She also gave him some dinner, which consisted of bacon, bread, and potatoes. The importance of this fact was that the medical men were able to say from the state of the food found in the boy's stomach how long after that dinner he met with his death. He left Muddlecombe at about 2 o'clock and was next seen opposite the prisoner's house. A woman named Hughes, the wife of a blacksmith, heard David Mazey tell the deceased boy that his mother was not at home, after which she saw them both go into Mazey's house and close the door. That was the last time that John Thomas was seen alive. As the boy did not return home, his father and mother became alarmed towards the end of Wednesday, and some conversation took place with Jane Mazey on the subject. Jane Mazey made a statement to the effect that she had not seen the boy that day. On Thursday, the alarm became greater, but it was never supposed for a moment at that time that the boy had come to any serious harm. The police who were communicated with made inquiries and certain statements were made, but still there was no suspicion that anything very much out of the common had happened to the boy. Mrs. Mazey stated that she saw him on the road on Wednesday. The police searched the house thinking to find the living boy concealed somewhere, but they went away without discovering him. Certain statements were made by the boys and by the female prisoner, tending to show that the deceased had left the house. It was not suggested that Mrs. Mazey had any hand in murdering the boy. It was contended, however, on the part of the prosecution, that having discovered the murder of the boy, she tried to defeat justice and screen her children by false report. On Friday, a further search was made for the boy, and the police again went to Mazey's house and made inquiries. He, the learned counsel, should say that a ditch in Mazey's garden was taken up on the previous Thursday by a man who would state that he then found nothing there. On Friday, a person again searched the garden and then called the police and said that the missing boy had been found. The body was found in a ditch by a person whose attention had been attracted to it from the hedge. The head was most frightfully injured. The skull was smashed and contained only a small portion of the brain. The skull was cut from ear to ear, apparently by some blunt instrument, and the upper part of the head was attached to the lower portion merely by the scalp. The bones seemed to be cut right away from the ears. There was no blood about the body, and this was important to consider. The upper jaw was smashed and attached to the head simply by the flesh. The lower part was broken in 4 pieces, and the injury inflicted upon the head was something terrible indeed. An important point for the consideration of the jury was the statement by the boy David to the effect that the deceased boy fell out of a swing onto his head. The swing, as he should prove, was within 4 feet of the ground. In the medical men's opinion, that state that a fall would not lead to the appearances discovered. Subsequently, they said that the deceased and the younger prisoner climbed up to the roof of a ruined outhouse, and that the deceased fell down, resulting in the injury. Again, medical evidence would be called to show that it is impossible to cause these injuries in this way. Therefore, it was that at different times before the body was found, the prisoners gave different accounts of what had been done to the body and what became of him. When the body was found, the clothes were perfectly dry, and not such as they would have appeared had they been in the ditch on Thursday. Therefore, he should ask the jury to conclude that the placing of the body in the ditch must have taken place just before the body was found. He thought that from hearing the evidence, the jury must come to the opinion that the life was taken not later than 6 o'clock on Wednesday. What became of him from Wednesday till Friday morning, when the body was found in the ditch, the prosecution was unable to show. Evidence is brought forward regarding the money that it is inferred the 2 boys had taken off the corpse of John Thomas from the shoes he had delivered. P.C. Jones, in the course of his evidence to finding money hidden at places which had been reported to him by Benjamin Mazey. In one spot he found 3 shillings and 9pence, which Benjamin said he had hidden, and at another spot he discovered 2 shillings 7pence, which Benjamin told him had been put there by his brother. Benjamin said that this money was part of half a sovereign which the dead boy had left on the table, and which he, Benjamin, and his brother had to fight it between them. The money was hidden not far from Mazey's house. He also found blood upon the shoe of Benjamin Mazey. On the Tuesday following the Friday when the discovery was made, witness found a piece of brain on the opposite side of the narrow lane dividing Mazey's from the next garden, where he also discovered what appeared to be blood amongst some ashes. Police Constable Thomas said that when he conveyed the 3 prisoners to Carmarthen jail, the woman said, "I am quite innocent of this affair. I know nothing at all about it. I hope the boys will tell the truth about it." Turning to the boys, she said, "You tell Mr. Jones the truth." David said, "I saw John Thomas. He went with me into the house. He went down into the garden and played with the swing. Thomas and Benjamin got up on the wall. Thomas fell off and on his head. I got hold of his hand, but he died directly." Benjamin said a piece of timber broke under John Thomas and I nearly went down myself. David said, "I took hold of his hand and Benjamin his feet, and we carried him to the top of the garden. I placed a few clots on him." And Benjamin said, "I only put 1 clot on him." And David added, "Something white came out of his head, and I threw it over to Mrs. Power's garden." Witness added that in making a search at the place indicated, he found a piece of brain. P.C. William James said that David stated in his presence, after he carried him up to the garden, "I took half a sovereign out of his pocket." Thomas Jakes, lock housekeeper at Kidwelly, who had the prisoners in his charge, heard a statement made by David to the effect that the boy Thomas fell off an old roof and was killed. Benjamin said that when David saw he was dead, he took a half a sovereign out of his pocket, and Benjamin also said that they carried him and put him in a ditch, but that David and not he buried the deceased. The prosecution rests. The defence team stressed the circumstantial nature of the case and repeated the ofsaid improbability that the two boys could have carried out such a brutal attack as that which was sustained by John Thomas. It was also a requirement of law that, given the two boys' age, it was required beyond a shadow of doubt that the boys understood that they were doing was wrong. His lordship, in summing up, said that if the jury were morally certain that the boys killed Thomas, then they must find them guilty. But if unexplained things left their minds in any doubt or uncertainty, then they must acquit the prisoners. The law enacted that a boy under the age of 7 years old could not be found guilty of murder, no matter what the evidence might be, and between that age and 14, the law made it incumbent upon the prosecutor to prove that the prisoners knew that they were doing wrong. Knowledge of guilt might be shown in various ways, amongst them by concealing the body, and the jury must consider the particular circumstances applying to this case. With respect to that point, supposing the jury found the boys guilty, it did not follow that they must also find the mother guilty. The boys might be guilty. Was the mother innocent? Should the boys be found innocent, it would of course not be possible to convict the mother. Taking all of the circumstances into consideration, he should recommend the jury to hesitate a long time before they brought the mother in as an accessory after the fact. The jury retired at 25 minutes to 8 and returned into the blocks in 5 minutes. They found all the prisoners not guilty and they were discharged. Further particulars. A Victorian nightmare comes true in this case from 1874. A young woman passes after having given birth, a not so unusual occurrence in Victorian times, when childbirth could be a dangerous event. The woman is buried, but her casket is to be removed a few days later, when the horror of a live burial is revealed to all. From the Illustrated Police News, 23rd of May, 1874. A young married woman residing at Salon-Bouches-de-Rhône died shortly after her confinement in August last. The medical men, who were hastily summoned when her illness assumed a dangerous form, certified her death and recommended immediate burial in consequence of the intense heat then prevailing, and 6 hours afterwards the body was interred. A few days since, the husband having resolved to remarry the mother of his late wife, he desired to have her daughter's remains removed to her native town of Marseille. When the vault was opened, a horrible sight presented itself. The corpse lay in the middle of the vault, with dishevelled hair and the linen torn to pieces. It evidently had been gnawed in her agony by the unfortunate victim. The shock which the dreadful spectacle caused to the mother has been so great that fears are entertained for her reason, if not for her life. That concludes this episode of the mysterious tragic affair at Kidwelly. We really hope that you enjoyed the show. If I may beg your attention, though naturally only if convenient, the episode has, as the young gentlemen say, run its course. Matters have been addressed, mysteries resolved, tea, metaphorically speaking, taken. Should any guest find themselves less than satisfied, they are most welcome to pursue the scriptwriter on the matter. I should note, however, that the said party has quite understandably departed, likely to avoid further correspondence. Now, for those of you whose sensibilities were properly engaged, I am instructed, through frankly I find it all rather vulgar, to advise the following: like, subscribe and share. This is said to aid in keeping the narrative wheels oiled, the proverbial pantry stocked, and the algorithm, a most capricious and unpredictable creature, in a state of mild appeasement. That will be all. If further entertainment is desired, I shall be in the library dusting the first editions. This has been News of the Times, and I am still Robin Coles, extinguishing the lamps. Through the shadows speak yet.